Okay. Thank you so much for being part of my study on disruptors. If you don't mind introducing yourself and where you're currently at.
Hi, I'm Melissa Richards, and I'm the principal and founder of iMarketingMix.
Yes. And so I always like to start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town called Bassett, Virginia. If you've ever heard of Bassett Furniture, it's a small furniture factory and textile mill town in the central part of Virginia, right on the North Carolina border.
So looking back on you growing up in your youth, what was the education specifically, the emphasis on your education place at that time?
I was a first generation college student, and I my college education was important to me, but also very much to my parents, especially I think to my mother, because I always thought that she wished she had had the opportunity to go to college. She and my father got married very young, and he was drafted in the Army in 1968. So she always encouraged me to go to college.
Okay. So when did you know you were going to college? Where did you go?
Well, I think I always knew based on that encouragement by my parents. In fact, I remember I loved watching sports with my father, college sports specifically, even as a young kid. And I was, for some reason, I was in love with the Rose Bowl, and we would watch the Rose Bowl and the Rose Bowl parade, and I would say, I'm going to college in California, even at a tiny when I was a tiny kid. So I was always going to be adventurous and go off to college somewhere. My teachers and my guidance counselors did a great job of talking to us, especially in middle school, about college, and encouraging us, knowing that we were, growing up in a factory town and that a very small percentage of us were going to be headed to college. So they would plan our field trips to nearby college campuses. We went to the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. We went to the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And our schools didn't have a lot of money for big trips. We didn't do the big Washington, D.C. trip or other big trips that some of my peers did when they were in school. So I give a lot of credit to our teachers who curated those experiences to inspire us to go to college.
So where did you end up? California, Virginia?
So I stayed in Virginia, believe it or not. I didn't realize it back then, but my interests and abilities were both left brained and right brained, as they say. I was on the math team, but I was also co editor of the yearbook. My guidance
Mm.
counselor wanted me to apply to engineering schools because, in her words, I was a girl who was good at math. But I wanted to be a writer and a journalist. And so my English and advanced composition teacher really inspired me to pursue what I loved. And that I would be good at anything, but I should really follow my heart and my passion. So I went to a college fair very early on. I think it was early in my senior year of high school. And I walked up to a table for Hollins. It was Hollins College then. It's now Hollins University. And I fell in love with the idea of attending their creative writing program. So I ended up applying there early decision, and I got a partial scholarship, and it was accepted early decision, and I went there. I did end up transferring, but it wasn't, I was having a great experience. I was doing well in my grades, but I decided about halfway through that year that I wanted to go to a larger school that was a little further away from home. So I transferred to the University of Virginia in Charlottesville.
Okay. And do you graduate with a degree in creative writing or journalism or?
In rhetoric and communication studies. So
Okay.
the art of persuasion.
Very good. Um, like you, when I was younger, I was always going to go to school in like Colorado. I grew up in Connecticut, so I was always going. But
Mhm.
as it came down to senior year, my choices got closer and closer and closer. So I ended up going to school very close to home as well.
Mhm.
So you graduate from college. Do you go straight into a master's degree? Do you work? What do you do after graduation?
I did. I went straight to graduate school at Syracuse University. I was accepted into a program that they've been running now for 30 years, but it was new at the time, called Media Administration, where you do half of the curriculum in the Newhouse School of Communications and the other half in the Whitman School of Management, so in the business school. And I was there for a semester, and again, doing well, but realized, gosh, I studied hard and I'm studying even harder. And gee, I wish I'd kind of taken a break. And so I had a friend who was doing his master's degree at the University of Cambridge in England. And he said, you know, you qualify for a student work visa. Why don't you just take a semester off, apply for a student work visa, and go somewhere? So I did that, and I actually went to England and found a job with Cambridge University. And I was able to live on campus because I rented a room from what they call a house mom. So it's an adult who's living as a residence coordinator in one of the dorms. And I was able to live at St. John's College and walk to work every day in beautiful Cambridge, England. And it was an incredible experience that I really believe changed the trajectory of my career when I didn't even know it at the time.
Okay. So, do you go back to Syracuse?
I was planning to go back. In fact, I came back that summer when my work visa ended, and I was spending some time with my family. And I thought, I have about 4 weeks. I'm going to take some temporary work. So I got an assignment through a temp agency because one of the sports apparel manufacturers in my hometown was trying to hire a marketing director, and they wanted someone to come in and temp as an interim while they conducted their search. And so they hired me to come in. And after a few weeks, the manager came to me, my boss came to me and said, "You're doing really great work. I wish you would stay. Can I convince you to, stay?" And so I did. They offered me a job, and I ended up staying. And I I knew that I wanted to go back and finish my graduate degree. I just didn't know when. I really hit this corporate ladder, if you will, of a lot of travel. It's really exciting work in my 20s. I enjoyed it. And so it wasn't until later that I went back to when I entered higher education and made the pivot from industry to higher education about 16 years later. I completed my Master of Public Administration at Virginia Tech.
Okay. Do you go on past the master's, or do you stop at the master's?
I have stopped. I have considered on a number of occasions, thought about pursuing a PhD or perhaps an EDD. I don't know what the future holds just yet.
Fair enough. So looking back at that time in your life, what was the biggest lesson you feel like you learned at that time? I'm sure there are many, but
I think the biggest lesson, and I didn't know it at the time, but reflecting on it now, I know. I learned the value of taking chances and being resourceful. I was the kind of person who thought I had my whole life mapped out when I was 22 years old. And people would, even to the point where my peers were saying, "Oh, slow down, stop and smell the roses." But I was so energetic and ambitious, and I thought I had it all mapped out. But by making that unexpected turn in my journey, by leaving graduate school and doing that work in England, it paid off in the end. And now when I talk to students, college students, I encourage them to keep an open mind. When they graduate, don't have your mind set on a specific city or even a specific position. Perhaps be open-minded and flexible.
okay. So you started one master's program, you go on to get a different master's. What is the value of a graduate education to you?
Well, for me, after I pivoted into higher education, gaining that master's degree was even more important to me because I wanted to demonstrate that I'm practicing what I preach. If I believe in the value of higher education and a higher degree, then I want to represent that as well. So I had been practicing communications, public relations, marketing for 20 years. And in some instances, that's enough to say on job applications, I don't need a master's degree. I have the experience instead. But I wanted both. And I decided to pursue the public administration degree because I thought that would be really helpful for me at that point, rather than doing an MBA, for example.
Okay. And so you work in corporate America and you pivot into higher ed. Take us through briefly the trajectory in higher ed until you leave most recently to start your company?
Sure. I So in 2009, I is when I pivoted from industry. I just left a startup software company in Raleigh, North Carolina area, and accepted the job as vice president or as assistant vice president for marketing and publications at Virginia Tech. And that took me back home to Virginia, which was also a bonus for my family, that I was even closer to them. And I was there for 6 years. And then I moved into, I wanted to be a vice president. And I thought, if I move to a smaller college, I can really wrap my arms around the college administration and understand all the parts and pieces of it in order to be successful, rather than going for that role at a large university. So I pivoted into the liberal arts college space, and I served as a vice president for communications and marketing at 3 different liberal arts colleges, and then a brief period as a chief of staff. And I just recently decided to leave campus administration and launch my own business, because I feel that at this point, after 31 years, I'm ready to lead from the side. And I have a lot of experiences from the different college campuses where I have spent time in my career, that I can offer that experience and knowledge to college leaders, as we're at an inflection point in higher education of incredible change.
Mm-hmm. So can you share a personal experience where you had to overcome a significant challenge in your journey to leadership?
Yeah, I will avoid a specific example, because I don't want to call any person or any institution out. But I will say that I'm a change agent. So the most difficult experience for me would be managing blockers. So in every organization I've entered, I've encountered blockers. I think that's just a natural thing for all of us. But blockers are resistant to change, so much so that they intentionally work against you. And so I've joined and managed new teams that have embedded blockers, and it's, they've been there a long time. They have a lot of credibility with the institution. So it can be really difficult to come in and as a new leader and gain credibility when you're up against people who are basically, kind of giving you the stop hand signal. It's not welcoming, it's not supportive. So you have to figure out ways to navigate that. And I found that difficult, because I consider myself a kind person. And so it's hard. You have to be really comfortable having uncomfortable conversations sometimes.
Yes. How have you navigated and dealt with gender bias or stereotypes throughout your career?
Well, in both the corporate and higher education industries, I've encountered that. In corporate world, there were many meetings where I was the only woman at the table in those meetings. And I learned very early on that men tended to be promoted from within the company, but women had to move on to move up. So rather than fight that to stay at any one company, I was determined to be flexible and to move not only to another company, but move geographically as well. So that gave me some great experiences of living on the East Coast and the West Coast, and traveling abroad. But even when I first arrived in higher ed, I noticed that men tended to be promoted from within, and women were hired through search processes. So that was a little discouraging, that it wasn't much better. But I think it's improving. I've certainly done my part to call that out and make sure that I'm being fair in recruitment processes. It's true, I think, too, for just projects, not only promotions, but also projects. So I try to coach and mentor women leaders to have the confidence to ask for more responsibilities and negotiate promotions.
Okay. In your roles throughout higher ed, how have you approached leadership with innovation and a forward-thinking mindset?
So when I arrived in higher education in 2009, I was, I was the outsider coming from the tech industry, having spent the first half of my career so far there. But I brought what I didn't even realize that I had a forward-thinking mindset until I came into higher ed, and everyone was surprised at all the things that I had managed in the tech world. It was the early days of social media. So I had already been working with social media, but higher education had not yet embraced it. So I really got that started and wrote the first social media guidelines for the university and for departments. At that time, I remember pitching a conference, which was the American Marketing Association Higher Ed Symposium that year, to talk about social media guidelines. And my manager was so impressed that I got accepted to speak at that conference, having not been in higher education for just such a short period of time. And so that felt like I was pioneering back then with a forward-thinking mindset. And also, I would discover things like we were sending 6.5 million emails to alumni without a customer relationship management system. And so I would do the work to initiate those tools and resources. And so that felt good. It felt like early wins for me, being new in higher education.
That's awesome. What transformative programs or policies have you initiated to foster inclusivity and diversity?
So I have worked on well, first let me back up and just say that unequivocally inclusivity and diversity are really deeply held values for me. Those values are things that drew me to higher education. I saw a more transparent commitment to diversity and inclusion in higher education than I was experiencing in the corporate world. So I've worked on a number of different diversity, equity, and inclusion committees on different, a DEI communication strategy, inclusivity programs. I can't say that I specifically piloted any policy changes, but was certainly a part of the leadership teams that drove those changes and making a difference. One of the things that I did that really fostered inclusivity and diversity was I was a part at 2 different institutions. I helped co-found TEDx events. So if you're familiar with TED speaking opportunities, and TEDx is basically their version where you can license the TED materials to put on your own TED conference. And they were really working closely with colleges and universities to put them on. And so I helped co-found them at 2 different institutions. And we worked really hard to find and emphasize and amplify diverse voices. We were careful not to stifle personal narratives, even if they were difficult stories to share and hear. And so I was really proud of the work that we did in that regard, and also how well they were received.
That's amazing. And I probably have seen some of those. I use a lot of TEDx talks in my classes.
Great.
One of my favorite questions is, what is the most interesting idea that you had that failed?
Well, being in communications and marketing, I have a lot of ideas, and I had to learn to be careful with my ideas when I became a vice president, especially. When you have power, people think that everything you say, you're expecting them to do it. And I quickly learned that when I would put out ideas, a lot of times they would scramble around and think that but I was asking them to actually do that. And I had to train myself to say, no, I'm brainstorm with me. And that, I used to joke that, only 7 or 8 of my ideas are going to ever make it. So don't always take them at 100%. But the most interesting idea that failed is probably like a non-higher education example. But when my girls were little and they started losing their teeth, I found that I was constantly forgetting about the tooth fairy, as were many of my friends who are the same age, because we're so busy that we would forget about them, the baby teeth under the pillow, and playing the role of the tooth fairy at night. So I came up with an idea to create a mobile app and a website that would be interactive, where kids could write a letter to the tooth fairy on the website, and then the the website would automatically generate a text reminder to parents after their bedtime, about 9 o'clock, to swap out the tooth under the pillow for $1 or whatever the tradition is in your family, for the tooth fairy to leave behind. And I actually went through the process of writing the content for the website. I created like uh, the idea for it with some quotes and things that I collected from children that I knew. I was a Girl Scout troop leader, and of course, just talked to some of my friends' kids, and got funny quotes from them about describing what they think the tooth fairy looks like. And that was just fun, gathering all that material. And it's kind of, I love the idea of the user generated content around the folklore of the tooth fairy. But I also thought, okay, there's a business angle to it as well, because you can teach kids about dental hygiene and health. So you can get dentists to be sponsors of it. And so I had so much going on at the time that I never got it off the ground. I didn't have the startup capital to hire a mobile app developer and do it. But so it's been sitting on a shelf collecting dust, but I haven't seen anyone else do it yet. So maybe I should pull it back out.
Like, there's your idea.
There it is.
It's amazing. How have you challenged traditional norms and reshaped the culture within the academic communities in which you resided?
I'm not afraid to ask questions, especially the question of why. Why do we do it this way? Have we considered this approach? Again, I'm the change agent, embracing change. And I also think about there's an iterative interrogative technique that was developed by Sakichi Toyoda, who is the inventor and founder of Toyota. And he always said, you should ask why 5 times to get to the root of a problem. So why? And also, I'm not afraid to speak truth to power, which makes me a great partner for leaders who want to make a difference and are not afraid to embrace change. It makes some other leaders uncomfortable, of course, but that's part of the territory.
I love the 5 whys. I teach that in my strategic planning course. So
it's so simple but effective.
Yeah. And I mean, our kids ask us that all the time anyway. Like, they're like,
exactly,
it's naturally ingrained in them. And we seem to lose that as we get older.
True.
How has mentorship played a role in your own leadership development? And do you actively engage in mentorship relationships?
Yes, I have been really fortunate to have incredible mentors and sponsors throughout my career. Sponsors, of course, are the people who will, they have enough confidence in you to volunteer you for those important roles when you're not in the room. And, mentors, you can seek them out, or they may seek you out. And I've also had the privilege to work with some executive coaches through formal professional development programs. So I feel like I've had a lot of different experiences in that area. I encourage when people approach me and ask me to be a mentor, I always suggest that we document it and try to formalize it just a little bit. It doesn't have to have a lot of structure, but I think there's some accountability to sort of creating some goals and establishing a rhythm of touching base with one another. And also, I encourage women to seek out the sponsors, those leaders who are going to volunteer you, who are going to say, who would be excellent at leading this initiative? Melissa. She can do this job. She can lead this project. And but they don't always do that naturally, because they don't always know that you're willing to do that. So it's really important to seek them out and say, I would like to be considered for additional responsibilities or different responsibilities. Will you think of me? when appropriate opportunities come along.
And thinking of your mentors, were they mostly male, female?
Both, a
Okay.
combination. Yeah, I was really lucky to have some strong male mentors as well, and
Okay.
sponsors.
Okay. Good. Um, what advice do you have for women seeking mentorship or looking to foster collaborative relationships in higher ed?
As I just pointed out, they don't always organically appear. So you have to seek out mentors and have direct conversations with them about your needs and aspirations and how they can guide you. Telling them your why and why you're choosing them. You don't have to pursue the same career path as them for them to be a good mentor for you, but it's someone you trust and look up to, and maybe it's just their spirit or character or values that you admire and feel that you want to follow in their direction.
Why do you believe in the power of sharing personal stories, and how has storytelling impacted your own journey?
Storytelling, of course, has been a part of my education and career since I studied rhetoric and communication studies as an undergrad. And I joke that my life is an open Facebook because as a professional and a mother and a philanthropist and many, many other roles, I think it's impossible and not always healthy to try to separate them. I think it's important that you bring your authentic whole self to work and to every situation, because it makes you relatable as an empathic leader, and that builds trust. I try not to always lead with my own narratives because I want to be a good listener, but I do enjoy, sharing my stories and inspiring others with them.
I guess, can you expand on that? And in what ways do you think sharing narratives can inspire and empower the next generation of women leaders?
Well, I think there is power in numbers. So thinking back to the Me Too movement a few years ago, before that, women were less likely to speak out about their experiences in the workplace out of fear of retaliation, but together they made a difference and called that to light and helped move positive change in that area. It's not eradicated, but it has, I think that movement has made a significant difference, and it's empowered other women to feel that they can speak up when needed. And even if we don't always share our narratives in a public way like that, it's important for women leaders to know that they're not alone in their journeys. And it applies to positive experiences as well, not just negative things like the Me Too movement. But when I talk to other women about my experiences with mentors and sponsors, for example, I love seeing their eyes light up and their minds racing about how they can initiate similar outcomes.
Okay. The next section is fill in the blank, or just finish the thought. So women in higher education are
Determined.
higher education continues to be relevant because
it creates a pathway to higher purpose.
the perceived value of higher education is
Oversimplified when it's contextualized as not worth the cost investment. And I think that's an oversimplification.
I love that. 10 years from now, blank will be the norm in higher education.
10 years from now, shorter completion time to degrees and stacked credentials will become the norm.
And I do this work because
I do this work because I believe in the power of education for students and society, and I'm concerned about preparing the next generation of leaders for higher education.
Okay, rapid questions. What is a book you wish everyone would read?
Can I give two? One is fiction.
Yeah.
It's called American Dirt by Janine Cummins. And the second is a nonfiction book called Campus Economics by Sandy Baum and Michael McPherson.
Okay. I love through this process that my own reading list has like quadrupled.
Grown.
Yeah. Because no two people have given the same answer. So it has
Oh,
been
that's
really like
great.
just a wide array of books. Um, if you weren't a leader at your current institution or organization, what would you be doing?
I I imagine I would like to be a farm to table chef.
Mm. So you
I
like
love
cooking?
cooking. I love cooking, and my husband and I live on a hobby farm. He does all the farming. I do the cooking.
What's your favorite dish to cook?
To cook, ooh, risotto. I love experimenting with different flavors of risotto.
Okay, very good. I am not a cook by any stretch of the imagination. So my husband does all the cooking. So, but I like to eat it. Um, Favorite candy or snack?
Popcorn. I'm definitely a salty over sweet.
Okay. Any flavor popcorn or just straight up like movie theater popcorn?
Well, movie theater popcorn is definitely the ruling kind of popcorn that I like. In fact, I love going to the cinema by myself and with a big thing of popcorn and a Diet Coke. But my one of my favorites is making popcorn at home and then drizzling blood orange olive oil on top with sea
Wow.
salt.
Okay. I'm gonna have to try that. And then your favorite word.
My favorite word is agility. One, it's fun to say, and two, it's important, I think, as we navigate these journeys of our careers.
Well, that is wonderful. That is all my questions. Thank you so much for participating and doing this. I know that our schedules have not aligned in the last month or so, so I'm really excited that we were able to get this done.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been such a pleasure to be a part of it. I look forward to reading your book.
Hopefully.